To introduce Jan, I asked Jan for some really compromising information. Didn't get any actually. Nothing really, not real compromise. But just something interesting about Jan is that Jan first time stepped on board of an airplane when he was 26. Was quite nervous to go and quite sick of it, which lasted actually whole trip. Now 11 years later, so you can calculate that Jan now is 37. Very important. Now he sits in airplane on a regular basis. Of course, when there is no pandemic going on, traveling to lots of nice places and meeting developers all around globe. So let's welcome Jan with applause. And I will mute my mic, and now all attention to Jan.
Thank you for the announcement, and thank you for having me. So yeah, I'm Jan de Vries. I'm a cloud solution architect at a small consulting firm called 4DotNet here in the Netherlands, which means I get to go to a lot of customers and well do some consulting on mostly Azure related stuff, .NET related stuff, and guide those customers to a better cloud solution. I'm also an Azure MVP, and you can find me on on Twitter or any on the other social networks. Links are in the last slides, so you'll be able to find me. And today I want to talk a bit about using managed identities in Azure and you leveraging Azure Active Directory for this because it's a bundle. Yeah, you have to use both. But first, being a cloud solution architect most of my time is a question I get often is how do you design your solution? What's the best approach? What should you be doing? I'm also eager to know how do you design your solutions, be it small or big or local scale, global scale. I'd love to know this, so please type it in the Teams channel, and I will make sure to hook up on Slack later on also when I find it. But how I do it a lot of the times is designing the solution is check out which new services there are in Azure and find a way how to implement them in the new solution. This isn't a good approach, I know, and I should do better. Because what you should be doing and what I should be doing more is take all of these things into consideration. So what's the time to market for the solution? How complex can or should it be? What's the level of the development team at the customer? So if the customer has a very junior team or a very senior team, but not without experience in Azure, it doesn't make a lot of sense to make a big, complex solution which they won't be able to maintain when I'm gone. Also, performance is also something you have to take into consideration. Availability, all of these things are important, and these make up, these things and a lot more make up how you should be designing your solution. But today I'm going to talk about security, which is kind of important, and because it's kind of important because it's always in the news nowadays. So every other week or every other day we see a news headline pop up. So many millions of database records have been stolen. There's been a data breach on this API, on that API, stuff like this. So security is important. Like I said, I'm a consultant. I see a lot of customers and projects and speak to a lot of people at developer conferences. And what I see happen quite often, or more as I would like, is people come up with a solution which looks like this. So they have one app service, or multiple app services which host one or more APIs. And let me add a pointer to it. And so this app service is, you could consider this as a backend for frontend, which talks to some other API in the backend, also communicates with the service bus and some worker processes picking up messages from the service bus, also talks with some API, and well, we have some database and storage accounts in place. So a lot of stuff, a lot of services happening over here. And that's it, there's a solution and they are happy with it. It scales. Well, it scales. I don't know if it scales well because that's an implementation thingy. But then I come in and I say, yeah, well, okay, this looks okay-ish. But you do know the cloud is kind of a public place, right? So everything you put in Azure or AWS or the Google Cloud Platform or any other not so big cloud platform, it's public. So you have to do something about this in order to make it, well, more private, or at least not exposed to the outside world. And well, I've had at least one customer who was like mind blown. He was like, oh yeah, that's right, we totally forgot this. And they had like a dozen of services exposed, and they didn't even knew it. So nobody, or at least we don't know if they got exploited. We don't think so, but it's exposed, or data is exposed which they rather would not have exposed. Most of the times they do know it's public and they have taken something into consideration, like, yeah, we have added some IP whitelisting, so only Azure stuff can connect to it. Okay, it's a solution. When communicating with our services, you have to specify some secret code in the header, like secret code 1234, which is kind of, well, security by obscurity. We have some certificates or self-signed certificates, so you have to send them along with communicating between services, which isn't a bad idea per se. I just find working with certificates quite hard, or at least complex. That's the way certificates work. I'm not a fan. I know it's important and they're quite safe. It's just I'm not a fan. And if I'm lucky, I get to a customer and they say, yeah, we have some VNets integrated in our solution with some network security groups. And we even have some private links in order to communicate between the VNets and the subnets. So all is good. And I think Erwin is going to talk a bit more about these last two bullet points. So I won't be talking about this myself much. But if the customer has these two in place, or more of those networking security things, I'm pretty confident the rest of the solution is, well, designed quite well also. So that's my happy place. So if I'm at the customer which has VNets and private link in place with all network security groups, I'm pretty confident the overall solution is managed quite well. But still, you can do better, because if the networks are private, well, that's okay. So no one from the outside world can connect to it. But if you're in the network, you can connect to everything, because, well, that's just like your NAS at home, maybe. Everyone on the work group can connect to it. And you might want to specify only Jan can connect to these and these folders, and Jan's spouse can, well, not connect to Jan's private folder, but they can connect to other folders. Well, the same goes for the Azure landscape. So you might want to, or any other landscape, you might want to, well, secure those endpoints, those APIs. So how can you do this? Well, using managed identities. Managed identities is, well, not a new concept. It has existed for, well, I think about 3 years now, 4. maybe in Azure. And what it is, it's identity, which is managed by Azure, hence the name, Azure Managed Identities. And what does this mean? Well, if you're familiar with Active Directory on premises or in the cloud, you know you have a username and a password and some other details on it. And most of the time you have to change your password after a couple of days. Same goes for, well, service principals and other identities. But the beauty of managed identities is Azure or Azure Active Directory manages this for you. So rolling the secrets, rolling the password is something which is done behind the scenes and you don't have to worry about it. You just have to know the username, which is, well, the object identifier of your application. And you can, well, use all of this good stuff of managed identities. So this is a slide of how it works. It's this is basically one of the OAuth flows. So requesting a token, and a token has been granted, requesting, well, data from one of the resources and getting data from it. So you can forget about this if you already know OAuth and how the flows work, because, well, this looks rather complex and you don't have to know anything about this. You just have to know how to, well, use the SDK. So what do I want to accomplish with managed identities? Well, I want to make sure my API can connect to a backend API. So that's quite doable. You can do this on the open internet, but I want to know in this, let's say the speaker API, only identities which I say can connect to it or can get data from it, well, will get data from it. So I want to specify some roles in the speaker API. So the speaker API reader, the speaker API writer, maybe some more roles. And if an identity connecting to it and requesting data has the appropriate role, like the speaker API reader role, it can get data, and otherwise, well, it will just get an unauthorized or forbidden. So this is easy to do, or at least if you know what to do, like with most things, it's easy. But code-wise, it's not a lot of stuff you need to do. You just need to do a couple of steps inside Active Directory in order to set this stuff up. So the first thing you need to do is I also start up a browser with the Azure portal on it. So the first thing you have to do is making sure your app has an identity. So I've created over here an app service, which is a web application, and I've told it have an identity of the type system assigned, which means create a managed identity for me. So you'll see on the identity blade the system assigned identity and the object identifier. And this is the object identifier known in Active Directory, which has the name Jan de Vries Secure API-API. So I'm logged in my browser. Let me see. I'll move to it in a minute. Well, while this is running, app registrations. Okay. Secure API. All applications apply. Yes, so you'll see over here in my Active Directory, I have an identity called Jan de Vries Secure API, and for my staging slot, I also have an identity because my staging slot also wants to access resources. And with this identity, I can connect to Azure resources like a service bus, like Cosmos DB, like, well, SQL Server, stuff like this. But I can also use this identity, well, like I said, to connect to my other APIs. So in order to do this, or to get started, you first have to go to, this is what I just shown you. This is how to get a token. I'll get back to that later. So what you now need to do in order to, work with this managed identity is set up an app registration inside the Active Directory, Secure API Speakers. I've created this one, which is just next finish, and with a proper name. So should I turn this on? Well, it doesn't do a lot, but what this does is create an application inside Active Directory, which you can configure your backend API to. So I have this speaker API, and this will be the app registration for the speaker API, which I will configure later on. And what you need to do over here is next finish, and you can specify your own roles over here. So when you navigate to the manifest blade, you will see a big block of JSON, and probably the app roles property is empty, an empty array. And you can add new roles to this. So like I mentioned, I want the reader role and a writer role. You have to specify some other properties for this, but the most important part of this is the value and the ID. These two you have to remember, or at least these two is what you need later on, because you need the identifier in order to grant roles to a specific user, and the value in your code later on. This isn't everything you need to do though, so this is a great start to start modding your app registration. But you also need to go to the Expose an API blade and define an application ID URI over here. So this has to be a specific URI like https/whatever. It doesn't really matter what it is over here. This is the public URI you will use to get a token for. So this is what you specify when you go to database. You have to specify, I want to get a token for SQL Azure database. Now you have to specify, I want to get a token for this application ID URI. I will toggle this off because it obfuscates information, which is quite useful. So I need to get a token for this URI later on in order to get permission to connect to my backend API. What I discovered while testing this is you also have to add this client ID 872CD something something to the authorized client applications. And the reason is, if you're using Visual Studio to test out your code and want to connect to your backend API, it uses this client ID to connect to the backend. And if you don't authorize this application, you will not get a valid token, or at least not the token you want to have. In order to add this, you also need to add a scope to your app registration. So I've created a new scope for local development. It's just a dummy scope, doesn't do anything, or at least I'm not doing anything with it. I just said this is a valid client application. There's also an identifier for the Azure CLI. If you're using Rider, JetBrains Rider, you might connect underneath via the Azure CLI. So you might want to add this client ID also. The link is in the slide deck, so I'll export the slide deck later on and provide it to Edgar's, so he will can give it to you if you're interested in it. So that's the most important part over here. Is there something else which I'm missing? API permissions? Well, no. Authentication also. This is what you see when creating the app registration. You have to specify a redirect URI. Not used in this scenario, so this can be just bogus information. It does have to be specified. And that's all there is to it for the app registration. Let's see, that's this stuff, the new registration. This is the link which I mentioned before. It has well, the identifiers for Visual Studio and for the CLI. And the manifest, so you can copy paste it later on. You don't have to take photos or pictures, screenshots. So and that's the basic stuff you need to do. Let me open up Visual Studio. So now that we have the app registration in place in the Azure Active Directory, we still have to connect our web application to it, our web API. So what I have over here, just a small introduction to this solution, is I have this front-end API, which you can consider as a backend for front-end API, and it will connect to multiple APIs on the backend. So over here I have a conferences API and a speaker API. So as you might have guessed, this one, the conference API, will provide me with conferences, and the speaker API can provide me with speakers. Pretty basic stuff. You can also create a new project, next finish, and be done with it. And you have the weather forecast controller, which is how I started. So this isn't very special, but as you can see over here, I have a get on my controller with the role attribute speaker, secure API speaker reader, which is the same name, the same value as is specified in the manifest before. So these are, well, mostly created by developers and provided to the people who can manage the Active Directory. But the developers are in control which roles get to connect to which endpoints. In order to set this up, well, you first need to have, of course, authentication and authorization in place. Do remember to do this in this order. I think it's also mentioned in the docs, but it has taken me, well, too long to figure out. I had these two in the wrong order. So if you first add authorization and then authentication, you get all kinds of weird errors, and your app just doesn't work. So do remember to do this properly. And over here, well, you have to specify your authorization, the default policy. So what I'm saying over here, all requests to my API have to be, well, a valid JOT token, which is what this policy does, and that's all it does. So in a production system, you might want to make your policies a bit more advanced and requiring more claims, checking which tenant, checking which, well, who is connecting to it, stuff like this. But then the authentication, I'm stating I'm using the job bearer scheme and validate, well, which audiences, well, add the valid audiences and specify which authority to add, which are all coming from the app settings, so the configuration settings of your app service. This is all hosted on GitHub, so you can clone it later on if you want, and read it at your own comfort. But as you can see over here, or no, this is the ID of the app registration, and this is the application ID URI. So this is what I had, the API semicolon / some GUID. So that's what you would be pasting over here. And this is the client ID. So this is the application ID, the GUID of your app registration. And this is just, well, the same for everyone aside from the tenant identifier. So this is just stuff you need to know or need to configure properly, and then you're good to go. So in order to test this stuff, I have this test backend controller with a get on it, and it will invoke the speaker service. So and what this does is what the code in the earlier slide did. I'm generating an access token, and of course I make an HTTP client with an authorization header attribute where I'm specifying the bearer token and making a GET call, and well, returning the API call details. So for debugging purposes, I have the access token over here, the body, the status code, and the reason phrase. So if something fails, I want to know why. Well, the most important function over here is the generate access token, which is, well, the same application ID URI, so API semicolon / GUID. The tenant ID, which is, well, the tenant identifier. And this is what you have to specify. You can use the Azure Service Token Provider just like you use when connecting to SQL, Service Bus, whatever Azure resource. You can use the same one for, well, making a valid GEL token for your own APIs. So get access token async, and this one is optional, the tenant ID, but I have it specified here for a reason. If your user lives inside multiple tenants, this get access token will get an access token for the default tenant your account is in. So you might have an account which lives inside 5 tenants, like mine does. And for my testing subscription and tenant, which is like the 4th or 5th, whatever, not the default. So it gets a token and makes a validated request to the backend and says, yeah, you don't have the roles necessary for making this request. Specifying the tenant, you force, well, this provider to connect to the tenant you have specified and get the token you expect. So this is useful to know when debugging. So when I found this out, I saw a token which didn't have, and my account didn't have the roles I expected. So I had assigned the reader and the writer role to my account. And in the claim, those weren't visible. So that pointed me in this direction. Specifying a tenant ID is a good idea. Nowadays, I always specify it, just, well, because it's easy to add. That's it. It's easy to add, so I think it's a good practice to add it. And that's all there is to it for, well, making an authenticated call. So that's this code. We've covered it. And now we have one service which can make a GEL token for the other API and making a call to it. And we have another service which is connected, or at least configured, to know the app registration we created. Roles are unknown, and we've configured authentication and authorization for our endpoints. So we're good to go. But now we have said in service 2 you need to have the reader role and the write role for specific endpoints. This service still doesn't have it. What you need to do in order to get this is, well, add the roles, the necessary roles for service 1 to connect to service 2. So service 1 wants to read data from service 2. Therefore, you need to, well, post a message to the Graph API of Azure Active Directory, or, well, the Graph API as it's called. It looks a bit like this. So in the URL where you're posting to is the identifier of the enterprise application. So I'll show you this one in a minute, because this is different as the app registration. I'll go to it right away. So app registrations, and now I have the enterprise applications. So speaker, so applications. So over here, so I have this object identifier over here, which is well, like I said, different as the application identifier and the object identifier of the app registration. That's because the app registration is kind of a contract, and the enterprise application is, well, more like an implementation. There's probably a much better thing you can compare it to, but that's how I see it. The app registration is the interface, and the enterprise application implements this interface. It's a bit too simple to say it like this, but that's, well, it gets the point across, or at least I hope. So you need to add the roles to this enterprise application, or at least get it from here. So I'm specifying the identifier of the app role, the principal, the object identifier of the managed identity. So this is the identifier of the role I specified, so the reader role. This, well, the long GUID, which has the value speaker reader. The principal ID, well, the managed identity object identifier, it's a service principal. It's not a user, it's a service principal. And the resource ID, again, the identifier of the enterprise application. So you have to specify it twice. That's the way it is. So when this, when you have this set up, your account will have the roles you've specified over here. Well, immediately when making a request, you will see this role inside your claims. So we can test this. I'm using Nightingale for this. You're probably familiar with Postman. So this is the same as Postman, just Windows 10 modern UI app. What's it called? So this is the speaker controller. So this is my backend service. When I'm requesting data from it, I get an unauthorized because I'm not specifying a token over here. So nothing in the body. So the get fails. However, when I'm connecting to it with, well, my test backend, so which is the code we just saw, it makes a request to this endpoint, the speaker's endpoint. We should be seeing, data. So these are the speakers, first name Jan, last name de Vries, which is me, public, the speaker, and is this all? Well, there's some more. So this is the JSON body we got from the speaker API. States 200, and the reason is okay. So you see, I'm not kidding. Over here, jot.io. Disabling the laser pointer as it annoys me. So over here we have the token. So you can see all the data. It expires in well tomorrow, and you can see the roles over here. So I'm this service which I tested has the reader and writer role. So that's why it can connect to it. And that's all there is to it. That's all there is to it. So it's a lot of steps, but you can just copy paste it from this slide deck and be done with it. But it's good practice to add this on top of the, well, security you already have in place, because this way you can connect or can granularize which services can connect to each other. One thing though, as I'm using Azure Active Directory free, I can't add security groups to the roles, which is annoying because I'd rather grant roles to a security group and add people or service principals to those security groups. But this is something only Azure AD Premium has. I think most corporations do have Azure AD Premium, but I'm working on an MSDN subscription over here, and you can't use, or at least I think you can't use MSDN credits for Azure AD. So I would have to pay for every user inside my ID like $5, $7. per month, which is too much for my, well, single subscription, because I don't want to spend any money on it. But that's something you need or want to know when you are playing with it. You can do the free trial of Azure AD P2, but after a month it will just disable and you're stuck with something which doesn't work. So that's about it for my talk. If there are questions, let me know. You can contact me over here on GitHub. So the source code is also available on GitHub. I'll provide the slides with the Edgars. And yeah, like I said, I think it's a good idea to use managed identities in order to granularize the traffic between services. So the project I'm on now, we have like 20 services. And because we didn't do anything for security and authorization, all of those services can connect to each other. We're now busy implementing this stuff because I said this is important and I don't want every service connecting to me. I want people to know this, development teams to do this consciously, and some architect or architecture board team has to, well, approve it, because we don't want to make a big spaghetti of our solutions. We want to, well, make sure it's kind of properly designed. So that's it for me.
So it should be that you can hear me now as well.
Yes, I can hear you very well.
Yeah, just reminding to people that if you write a question, I have to confirm it. Just that's how Teams works. It's not my choice. And then there's around 20-second delay in live stream. So if you write something, be ready that it can take up to a minute while I react. Well, you will see the reaction. At the moment, from what I published, do you see, Jan, the comments in Q&A?
I think I have to stop sharing in order to see stuff happening again.
Oh. Okay, I will make you big. So I'm afraid there are no questions right now.
That's good. Either way, everyone is getting beers, or I didn't explain it very well.
Yeah, we have saying, yeah, if there are no questions, then either everybody understood everything or nobody understood nothing. I'm quite sure that many understood a lot and they are still just thinking what to ask you. I don't know how it's in Netherlands, in Latvia in general. If you ask a question, you have to give time for people to think. We take it quite serious, and if you don't handle that half of minute of silence, then you just broke the thinking process of people.
Yeah, I have one coworker who's such a fast thinker. So when I'm giving a presentation or discussing some technology with him, he's like, I'm only halfway through a sentence and he already has the most advanced questions on the topic, which I didn't even consider yet. So that's such a joy to work with him, because he's such a great thinker and developer.
I hope he's not the critical one, who, I mean, the critic who is just criticizing.
No, he's critical in a good way.
Yeah, that's good. But while we are still waiting for questions, I have to drop the link I promised to feedback form. Where is it? It's here. It's here. Please give us feedback. Okay, I published that one. So I saw your Just I'm curious. While we are waiting for some serious questions, then that gap I can fill with my maybe not so serious. And we are just as introduction till for last couple of years we were organizing different workshops or training as a part of conferences, and because of COVID we are now looking to do training also as a without conferences. So actually one happened yesterday and today, Python programming, and we have been thinking about new brand name for that business, and I saw your company name 4DotNet. What's the deep idea behind it?
That's a very good question. Well, the name is from we're only doing .NET development, so I think it's something in the saying of we're doing only for development for .NET solutions, something like this, or maybe Erwin can think of a better story. But
yeah, I think it's kind of meant like if you need anything on the Microsoft ecosystem, then you should be with us. So it's kind of if you need to go .NET, then 4.net's probably the company to go to.
And you should.
So there is kind of question, but I don't get it. The question is why so serious? But I'm not sure. Is it about company name or is it about my face? No, I'm just depressed. That's why it's so serious. That's my normal condition. Actually, I'm smiling. If you didn't recognize. So, okay,
Yeah, we also did lots of trainings the past couple of months. We also have a trainer in the company, and well, most of the time the rooms were packed every week with trainings and trainees. But now we have to do it virtual, so that was an interesting transition for both the trainer and the attendees.
Mm-hmm.
Good to hear you manage it fine also.
Mm-hmm.